there, my name is Daniel Franco and this is the Creating Synergy podcast, your business and leadership podcast where we speak to high-profile leaders and thinkers about their careers and dig deep by asking the questions we all want the answers to, uncovering their stories, strategies, leadership lessons, and their secrets to success. So welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. My name is Daniel Franco and today on the show we have Anton Andreacchio. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Your name has been thrown at me so many times, and I reckon it's taken me a good 6 to 12 months to finally get the opportunity to get you in this room and speak to you. You're elusive, hard to get hold of. So thank you for coming on. Now I want to start off really with what you've been described to me as and why people have said you need to get Anton on and you need to speak to this guy.
Okay, hit me.
You've been described to me as someone who specializes in the intersection of technology and human behavior. What does it look like in that space? And how did you get there?
Well, firstly, am I a specialist in the intersection of technology and human behavior? I don't know if I specialize. In many ways, I'm a generalist.
Okay.
I'm not a researcher in the middle of that intersection. It's just through the, paths that I've found myself on. I've found myself on a range of interfaces between technology and the human kind of intersection. And I don't mean user interface or user experience.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the role of virtual reality in training football players, or what's the role in animation in construction? These areas which we didn't think we'd be doing, but we've just kind of gravitated towards it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And what is, when you talk about the intersection, so if we deep dive, let's dive into that intersection.
Straight off the bat.
We're standing on one of the street corners and we're looking in at that intersection. What's happening? Where does that interaction begin? What does it look like? What are you trying to communicate to the world or interact with from a human behavior?
Oh, look, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's just whatever the people want.
No, it's look, I'll speak about the virtual reality one because it's a funny one.
Yeah.
We don't understand the technology. When we first started working with it back in 2014 or so, there was a lot of, because we came at it from the filmmaker kind of vector, it was all about how do you produce a VR film? You write the script, you film it, you edit it, done.
Yeah.
But montage doesn't exist in VR. It's a different film grammar. It's a completely different language. And then as we found these other intersections, we found, well, we don't actually understand what this is from a human perspective. Like, I get what the tech is, great. We know the platforms, we know all the cool whiz-bang components, but when you put it in the hands of different people, it means very different things. And so we found that the way that we competed was not by cheerleading the tech, it was by asking better questions of what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
And not just what works in VR, but why didn't it work in VR? Or why didn't things work in VR? Or why was it this promised technological land and it just never came? And so, yeah, we tend to dance on that interface with some of the works we do.
Beautiful. So, excellent. So let's move back again and look at this from a helicopter view.
Sure.
So we've gone down into that intersection. Let's move back. You're the founder of Convergen, Jumpgate, Artisan Group, Double Bishop, GMTI Consulting. Some of the works that you've been involved in, so you're heavily involved, like you're also the chair of the Adelaide Film Festival and arts, the arts guy here in South Australia. I'm going to throw that at you anyway. Okay. Whether you accept it or not is another issue. But some of the works you've been involved in have featured at Sundance, at Venice. Is it Biennale?
Biennale, yeah.
Biennale. You've worked with the Symphony Orchestra here in Adelaide and created what is the first virtual reality symphony orchestra in the world. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you've done some amazing things. Can we understand your journey and how you've come about to build so many amazing and intuitive businesses?
Where should I start?
Let's start at the beginning. Where did it all begin?
I think an inflection point, which is probably appropriate to kick things off, was going to university. Because I've thought a lot about this. It's hard to, when people ask, what do you do?
So much.
I shut down.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know.
It's like asking what's your favorite book. There's just so many options.
Well,
right?
yes, but there is something about our identity nowadays, and it's the Protestant work ethic thing. It's we're defined by what we do. You have a job. This is where you fit. I didn't really fit, and I remember going to university with, and one of the pieces of advice I was given was not which career to go into, but this. It was a trope at the time of, people in your generation are going to have 7 different careers in their lifetime. 7 different careers. Doesn't matter what you do, you're going to be all over the place. Well, I listened to that. It was wrong in many ways. The career pathways are still pretty similar to 20 years ago.
What is the number?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know these things, but I was told that, and so I thought, okay, well, what am I actually trying to do here? So that was the first point. The second point was I did study abroad in America. I found it a transformative year being exposed to the college system, the American way of thinking, the entrepreneurial kind of impulse there.
So you went to UCLA, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. That was a really big impact on me. And then the third was, as a kid, I always did too much stuff. I never had one thing that I did. I tried doing music and sport and math and all sorts of things. I never really understood what I wanted to do. So I developed a different way of looking at things. It wasn't by design. The next phase is I started this company with my brother called Convergen. But then slowly over time, what we did is we found different ways of operating. Not build the company, sell the company, done, but Convergen in many ways, and punctuate this if you need me to wrap things up.
No,
but Convergen was really the first epoch after university. So we built this company, visualization and infrastructure. We found it was a jail of our own creation. We couldn't explore other stuff. We were the visualization guys. And so we went, okay, well, let's explore VR, not just because we like the tech, but to understand what it means to not be owned by the company that we have. And do we build one company that does everything, or a series of targeted things that can operate in different domains and modes? Great. And that was an experience unto itself. Similarly with the film industry, and similarly with some of my other interests. So the way I describe it is there's 5 different domains. There's obviously the personal life, but then there's the professional lives. That's the businesses in creative industries. There's the academic life, back at university. That's good fun. There's the governance life, and then there's the arts life, which each of those are somewhat in tension, but it's a dynamic sort of tension. It's something that allows me to be a generalist, not necessarily beholden to one or another of the different kind of domains of interest. So
we'll get into.
Does that make sense?
It does, and we'll get into your university and education piece soon. But I think about Elon Musk, right, who has created so many different businesses, all with a common purpose, right? The common purpose is to create interplanetary species that, that's his ultimate vision. So he creates Tesla to build the electric battery and whatnot. He builds Solar City. He builds SpaceX. He builds the Boring Company. He builds these, which all have the ability to position ourselves to travel planet systems and whatnot. When you have set up your life and you say you've got those 5 areas that you focus on, is it all with the same common goal? Is there a purpose in place? Is there something that you're trying to achieve, for humanity or for yourself?
Really starting with the light stuff.
I told you we'd jump straight in the deep end.
Look, I've tried other ways and it hasn't worked for me. One thing that I've found that does work is not treating this as a linear pathway. It's not I'm aiming at the goal, I'm going to just really push until we get to that. Mainly because I've been wrong about everything. It's not a mode I find helpful. Instead, what it is I have an acknowledgement that there are certain things that I find meaningful, and it's more of a winding. It's more of a winding towards, and we'll never quite reach it if I could, I'm being quite indulgent, aren't I? It's this idea that we're not defined by one thing, and we're usually not. I mean, people can say they're defined by their family and their job and certain things they've done, but I've found essentially that level of resolution of 5 things is what's useful to me, and then how I operate in those domains is I have different ways of doing that.
Yeah. So
I'm not Elon Musk.
No, I understand that, but you've like from the arts and film industry and the creative industries world that you play in, you're having a severely positive impact, especially within South Australia and Australia.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So yes, Elon Musk is like a stretch, but you are definitely having an impact in your community, which is, kudos. Well done.
I'm proud of the contributions we make.
Very good. So talk to us about the creation of Convergen and Jumpgate, and let's go through that as a linear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Convergen. Look, part of the motivation again was not necessarily we have an idea, we're gonna do this. It was looking back on it, a lot of uncertainty about what to do, and I was very wary of getting a job because I'm too competitive. I'll just compete at that for the sake of it, and then 10 years have passed, and that's all I know how to do.
So how old were you when you started?
21.
Okay.
21.
Fresh out of uni.
Well, originally it was in visual effects.
Okay.
And so my younger brother, who's my business partner on all of these, Carlo, shout out, he's probably one of the few that will watch this.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. But
no, we've...
Convergen, we did that as a visual effects company. We very quickly found that the right time to start a visual effects company was in the 90s. Not because the industry was growing then. It's kind of been a race downwards with lowering costs, tax incentives, tech, all these things. And who were we to start a visual effects company at that time? But the time to stuff things up is in your 20s, so that's fine. But what we did find is an intersection with infrastructure, because I come from an engineering background, and we happened to find our way onto this little project with Nico Soukalis called the Adelaide Riverbank Pedestrian Footbridge.
Well done.
And we helped with the tender on that.
Yeah.
And we were like, wow, this is amazing. We've helped actually impact the outcomes in a small way. It's not all about either my design or this, but we were part of the game that ended up, there was a fork in the road of which tenderer was going to win, and we helped impact that. And we found that really cool. And so now Convergen, we've just clocked our 1,000th project. Wind farms, mine sites, certain hospitals.
How big's the business?
We've got about 15.
Yeah,
15.
Great.
Don't need to get any bigger than that.
No.
That's enough to give me headaches. But no, it's what we found at about project maybe 200 was that we weren't making pretty pictures.
Okay.
We were engaging in a game. There is the engineering world, which is solution-oriented, and then there is the communications world, which is people-oriented, and political, and game theoretical, and perception-oriented. And it's very different worlds. And what we found is the value wasn't in our product, it was how we navigated that interface. We weren't in one world, we weren't in the other, we were in the middle. Yeah. And we're able to speak both languages. So we actually acted almost like a translator through...
Good spot to be.
In some ways, but the problem is we didn't fit.
Okay.
And so no one knew how to take us. So we're never part of any entrepreneurial scene or anything like that. But we found a pocket of value, which I think is actually a real entrepreneurial thing. It's, we found something here. What do we do with that?
You found your niche.
Yeah. And so then we grew that over time. We work all around the country. We've got at any given time about 40 projects on. In this profound space of what does the future of infrastructure look like, be it in energy or hospitals or bridges or whatever. So, really proud of what we've built there.
What are some of the outside of the footbridge? What are some of the other projects that you've worked on in that space?
In Adelaide?
Yeah, or Australia, or landmarks that people would know.
Well, this is an Adelaide-centric podcast, which I love, by the way. It's finally we're having some conversations about it. So this is great.
Brilliant.
Oban, the Urban City Access Project, Darlington to Torrens, Northern Connector, Regency to Pym, various stages of the proposed Darlington to Torrens, several hospitals. We've worked on roundabouts. We work with
some of the bigger
councils. But we actually work on the small ones too. In terms of we do a lot with Oz Minerals. They're fantastic. They're absolutely amazing. And their support as a South Australian company for smaller South Australian companies has been it's been fantastic.
We've had their head of people and culture on this show. And they are doing some wonderful things.
And we're really proud to be working with them. So Oz, we do a lot with JBS and G.
Yep.
Obviously, we know
Yeah,
Andrew
Adrian,
Nunn. He
yeah.
gave us a break back
Yeah.
in the day too. But a lot with wind farms and particularly renewable energy.
Yeah, great.
So that's just in South Australia.
Yeah.
But Logan enhancement projects, a lot with the LX arrays in Melbourne.
Yeah, wow.
City Metro stuff, Melbourne Airport Rail things. Yeah, I'll keep going. But how long you got?
Let's jump into Jumpgate. So the movement then, because you thought we don't fit, so we need to create something else here.
Well, we were just unreasonable.
Yeah.
It's like we had our niche, but we're also shooting off with all these other ideas. And part of it was the terror of being an entrepreneur. It was, I need to grow. It's, I need to find other ways to bring value because we weren't certain about anything. And here was this tech. And we tried doing other things as Convergen, but we'd kind of clocked into this thing of there is a certain theatre to startups. If we're Convergen, a visualization company doing VR, we're not in the VR game.
Yeah.
So let's start a separate company and see what happens.
Okay.
And it's not that hard. You get the ABN, you get the brand, cost a little bit of money, suddenly you're a VR company. Now, this was 2014 and we were ridiculed. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
We did these things like we strapped these GoPros together and ran through the banner with the Adelaide Crows and put it in Crowmania and everyone put the headsets on. They're like, oh, it's a bit average, isn't it? It's like, oh, that's okay, cool, fine.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden something happened. All of a sudden there was a switch that was flicked and we were cool. I was like, oh, this is the next big thing. I'm like, but you just told us we were ridiculous.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But we saw that tech wave come and hit. And
How did you see it before it actually arrived?
Carlo, my brother.
Yeah.
So he was a Kickstarter for the Oculus DK1.
Yeah, wow.
And he was also mining Bitcoin, I think, back in 2012 or something like that. But he's also a different sort of thinker that hasn't gone through the traditional pathways. And so I've learned to listen to him on a lot of these things. And also it's interesting and it's fun. And so, the first things we did was football. Called up Vince Ciccarello. We got an introduction to Vince Ciccarello and he was like, yeah, sure. So plonked it on stage and off we went. And
Amazing.
off it went, yeah. So that led to a whole series of other adventures as the wave then caught us and kicked us all the way through, which has resulted in us working with the AFL umpires. You might see the GoPros on the chest. I won't say too much about that. Defence projects, we work a lot with University of Newcastle and in the medical space. But on the other side, there's high performance and then there's high concept, the contemporary art space, which we're really proud of how Jumpgate stayed away from the big show. A lot of our compatriots from 2015-16 did that and went under. And we've kind of gone, no, we're in Adelaide, we need to compete our own way. And so we've slowly gathered confidence in that and we keep plugging away. So that's Jumpgate.
We could go into every single business all day, but we've got a podcast that I want to...
I'm in your capable hands.
Yeah, I do want to
carry on
jump
about.
into a few other questions. And I really want to deep dive into all of your work as we work our way through this podcast. But can we just again touch back on who from? I know when I wrote you that I sent you a message last night saying who is Anton, and you just wrote back haha. So it's a big question. But I know that mathematics, data science, like your study, and that you said one of your pillars was education and study and growth and learning. How has the mathematics element shaped your life? And I know you've done a lot of work in philosophy as well, or you're studying philosophy as well. Can you elaborate on
how did I end up from Jumpgate over at university again?
Yeah, and actually, while we're on that, how do you manage so many hats? How do you put all these hats on? Because you've got Convergen, Jumpgate, Artisan Group, Double Bishop, GMTI. Then on top of that, you're on 6 boards. You're the chair of Adelaide Film, which is this beautiful brochure sitting in front of us. You're board member of Adelaide Symphony Orchestra. You're board member of South Australian Entrepreneurship Advisory Board since inception, which I know you said that earlier. The board member of ACE Open, the Uni of Adelaide Creativity and Culture Board, Lot 14 Arts and Culture Board, Adelaide Biomed City Board, and plus your 5. How does this my brain cannot actually grapple.
Okay, so which one first? How do I manage it, or how did I end up back in academia?
Let's go to the management first, and then let's talk about academic.
I needed to move out of. There's several reasons. First of all, with Convergen, the more I get involved with projects, it doesn't always have a positive impact.
Yeah.
So to separate myself out, I signed up to other things, and it created this pull effect to create the room for the company to actually evolve.
Growing, okay.
And that was a mechanical reason. Another reason why I can manage all this is, I think it's Parkinson's law. It's the time to complete a task is proportional to that which is available or something. It's like, I think I waste a lot of time. I don't work that hard. Third is my brother and the team at Convergen, James, Cameron, I could go through all of them. We've really promoted the open source kind of philosophy in how we work, which is all about autonomy. And so as I've moved away, they've actually stepped into a lot of these different areas. And so I couldn't do any of this without them. But it was one of the advantages of being an entrepreneur. Once we hit a stable kind of state, we have time and space for other adventures. Another reason is if I don't have kids yet, so I have all this time compared to a lot of my friends.
Yeah.
No, but also the 40 under 40 kind of hit me.
Yeah.
I got acknowledged for the first time for what I was doing when that was first launched. And I was quite emotional about it because we're not part of an industry that has ways of supporting people with career growth and transformation. We're out here, often no one wanting us to succeed because we're upending so many things. And we were acknowledged. And I found it kind of terrifying, not just because it didn't sit well, but I was looking around and I was like, I'm not that young. I'm 35. Sure, we can say, oh, that's young, but it's not. And, a mathematician does his best work by 23 or not at all. But honestly, it's like from a leadership perspective, this is the cohort that's going to be leading the state in 10 years' time. What are we doing now? And I kind of felt a sense of pressure with that, not just a celebration of what I'd done, but an expectation of what I was going to do. So I was like, oh, shoot, okay, well, I've got some opportunities, and I went with some of them, particularly joining the Adelaide Film Festival board. But then I found myself at an intersection where there is really a deficit, which is who is stepping forward in some of these domains? Who has the time and space to step onto these boards at 35? Not a lot of people. So because I've done this entrepreneurial thing, I actually do have the privilege to be able to spend my time running around championing the Adelaide Film Festival. Or more importantly, I was able to stand up on some things which a lot of people didn't have the freedom to stand up on because it would have affected their livelihoods or things like that. So, there's a lot of factors in there. I've tried getting off some boards, but, I kind of love them too much. It's great fun. And I really enjoy contributing to all of those boards at the moment. It's such an incredible experience. Particularly at this age.
When people say follow your passion,
right,
and that's definitely what entrepreneurs would do. They would follow their passion, they would build something and create something. You seem to have many different types of passions. Is there anyone that you love the most? Is there, you say you love all your babies. Is there any one that you actually it makes you sing?
What did I say? You love your children all the same? It's a different sort of affection, I guess, but I'll reframe the question. What do I do when no one's watching?
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm very interested in data science in storytelling. Yeah. So we talk about an intersection of things. It's those two worlds colliding, the creative impulse and mathematics, the language of mathematics, not from an analytical perspective. And it's really interesting. I've been curious about it for a long time, and it's only been in the past 6 months that things like DALL-E and Bloom and all the natural language processing toolkits are now starting to enter the mainstream, and people are going, oh, heck, we've got to grapple with this. So that's something that I spend my weekends doing sometimes. But that's not to say I don't love Convergen and what we're doing with Jumpgate. It's just I do them for different reasons. And I'm not really following my passion, so to speak. I'm on a series of adventures, and once they start, we're on them until they end. So,
well, let's dive into the data science and storytelling.
Let's jump around there. I feel like I'm coming across as one of those lizards that can look at two directions.
I find your life amazing. I actually really do. I think there's so many great things happening and you're at the forefront of so many things. But this storytelling piece, I am obsessed with storytelling. It is something that I believe fundamentally as a way of influence or as a way of being able to capture an audience or being able to actually hold the room. Storytelling is the foundation piece for that. And on your website, Convergen, your slogan actually says, we tell stories about the future. So you've actually found a way to weave that into Convergen, which is absolutely beautiful. You make movies as well, so you tell stories through there. Yeah. So it seems to me that you are positioning yourself from a passion point of view. Can you tell me, as someone who's interested in learning about the art of storytelling, learning about becoming a master in storytelling, what you've learned about storytelling with the data science viewpoint?
I might.
And jump around as much as you need to.
There's a fellow at Adelaide University, 𝐢𝐿 He collaborated on this paper which did a big data analysis of story arcs. Mm-hmm. So he mapped the sentiment arcs of stories, the emotional arcs of stories, thousands of them, the 𝐢𝐿𝐞𝐵 fiction collection, and used a machine learning approach to distill it down to its fundamental arcs. There are 6 fundamental stories from a sentiment perspective, and that's great.
Yep.
How does that impact, like, the other work that I'm doing?
Yeah.
Like that's a frontier that I've actually done some work on.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough to be able to collaborate with Lewis in various domains. But on the other side, it's the lens that I look at entrepreneurship. It's the lens that I look at learning. It's the lens that I look at everything. It's the only thing that's made sense to me. And if you'll indulge me, I'll kind of go through it. So
Absolutely.
Stories are how we make sense of the world. It's how we pass down information, not from a scientific perspective, but from a narrative perspective of how to act in the world. When faced with certain situations, what do we do? And the dramaturgical kind of construction of these is deeply rooted in how we think. So we codify how we think in terms of narrative and drama, and then everyone at the end of the day goes home and watches these stories and they think it's just for entertainment. It's not for entertainment, not just for entertainment. It's because we're actually trying to figure out how to make sense of the world. That's what I get really passionate about. Now, I'll jump to an area which you didn't mention, which is entrepreneurship. When I joined the Entrepreneurship Advisory
That's
Board,
coming.
that was what I could contribute. Everyone else knew about capital. Everyone else knew about all the important other factors.
Yeah.
And I was looking at this going, that's not my experience at all. My experience is this traditional monomyth arc of the known world, the unknown world, and how do you navigate that through a mode of transformation. And that's how we've constructed a lot of our adventures. We consider them adventures. It's how do we engage with unknown in a way that's small enough it doesn't kill us. It's not an adventure if the dragon can't kill you, sure. But small enough that it doesn't kill us, but not so small that we don't change. So Jumpgate was an adventure in certain ways.
Yeah.
It was like, well, we can cope if that doesn't work. We go into the unknown, we come back with this knowledge, and now, okay, we've got something more to play with. And so we consider what we're doing a series of iterative adventures in all of these different domains, which seems to make sense to me. I mean, that's how we learn. That's why I've gone back to uni. I consider that an adventure in many ways. But so storytelling, I'm less of a theorist and more of a pragmatist in that regard. Yeah. It's trying to figure out what I'm doing as an entrepreneur. Traumatic. Being an entrepreneur is traumatic in so many ways. But that's what's given me a way of grappling with what I was going through, and that's what's given me a model for how to continue on that domain. Does this make sense? I don't know.
No, it does. And I love your thought process of entrepreneurship being... Like, I am an entrepreneur. I've started my own business here and podcast and all the above. I have never put it into the perspective of a hero's journey almost, right? Like that's what you've just done, which is really amazing. I think you're right. It is traumatic. Entrepreneurship is one of those things where you can have the worst day and best day in the same day. Like in the morning,
It's every day.
it's ridiculous, isn't it? In the morning, you're grappled with this sense of anxiety on a decision that's pending or whatever, right? And we all know anxiety is thoughts on the future and whatnot. But then in the afternoon, you're popping champagne because there's a big deal that's come through and everyone's happy and, you know, all the hard work's paid off, right? And in the same day, it's unbelievable. When we talk about entrepreneurship a lot, we have had your friend Andrew Nunn, the chief entrepreneur of South Australia, on the show. We've had David Fogarty as well, who is the founder of 𝐢𝐿𝐿, and they've just ticked over 400 million in sales. Simon Hackett, who brought, you know, the internet into Australia, really was one of the first people and created Internode. So can we touch on the storytelling aspect and entrepreneurship? And because you are on the advisory board, for those who are looking to grow in this world, for those who are really interested in starting something, creating an impact, whether it's in film, whether it's in tech, whether it's in services, whatever it might be, what's your advice to those when trying to embark on that journey? What advice will you give to your 23-year-old self now, sitting in the position that you are, saying these are the things that you can learn from, this is the ambiguity, this is how to deal with it? Is there any of that advice that you have?
Well, I'm wary of getting advice because I'm not sure I have it all figured out. Don't get caught up in the theatre. So much of, or maybe I'll just go through my thought process with entrepreneurship and maybe some of the frustrations and the things I like, the things I don't. So I was very nervous when I got onto the Entrepreneurship Advisory Board.
Is imposter syndrome sort
I'm
of thing?
not that impressed with the things I'm doing, and we haven't raised capital, and in a lot of ways we don't tick a lot of the Elon Musk, the Muskian kind of check boxes. But we, I found this paper that's the most cited entrepreneurship paper at the time, and it's from the 70s, and it spoke about entrepreneurship in terms of three things: you have an idea, you believe it'll succeed, and you're willing to go after it. And that's always stuck with me because so often we conflate social entrepreneurs with the high-tech 10x entrepreneurs, with small business entrepreneurs, with people who aren't starting companies but are practicing an entrepreneurial spirit. And to me, that became kind of a way of framing what an entrepreneur actually is. Now,
so what was it? So you have an idea.
You have an idea. You believe it'll work, and you're willing to go after it. So it's that act that I'm willing to actually pursue this. That to me is an entrepreneurial impulse. But a lot of people aren't willing to go after it unless they get a grant, or unless they get some support from someone, or unless they get certain cues. And it's like there's a leap of faith there. There's a certain spirit that goes along with that. And faith. There's a Feynman quote, I think it was. It was that. Let's see if I can remember this. It's. Science is the culture of doubt, and religion is the culture of faith. Now,
science is the culture of doubt,
and religion is the culture of faith.
Yeah, Richard Feynman is that.
Yeah. And the reason I raised that is, I became somewhat like the term entrepreneur doesn't sit well with me in a lot of ways because it's become euphemistic for other things. It's all about the signalling. It's who's raising money, what incubator. It's almost become a structural game.
So it's almost like tech owns that word, doesn't it, right now?
Well,
it does feel that way.
There's a natural gravitation towards high tech in entrepreneurship.
Correct.
But, you know, my great-grandfather started a bakery and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But
I started a services business.
That's
no tech at all.
Endeavor.
That's right.
But we tend to go towards high tech, I think, for a variety of reasons. Over the past 20 years, it's been shown to be that's become the model, the archetypal entrepreneur. The one navigating the high-tech unknown space as opposed to these other modes. But I think that's changing. We're seeing a lot more social entrepreneurs too. But just so I'm keeping a coherent line, that was my definition for it. One of the frustrations I've found is that so much of the entrepreneurship world is based around signaling. It's you raise money to signal you're at a phase, or to you get this incubator to signal this, and it becomes so much this dance that it excludes so much of that conversation. So it becomes a bit of a cart before the horse in many ways. And so, entrepreneurship, if I can give advice to anyone, it would be to stay away from the theatre. It's like you can not stay away from it. You can participate in it, but don't let it own you, because then you're left. Everyone loves it when they're at the theatre, but when the tide goes out, you're left with everything.
Yeah.
You're left with holding the bag. So you got to be able to live with yourself, and you choose your regrets in that regard. It's like, if you're going to do it, you're accountable for what you're going to do, and if it goes wrong, there'll be no one else around. So, yeah, I'm very loath to just encourage people blindly into entrepreneurship because of that.
When you talk about the theatre, like the theatre of running business, the pressure, the perceived pressure, right? Because you set targets and they're your own targets, right? I know that you, especially from a tech point of view, and you talk about investment and all the above. You got shareholders, stakeholders, all the above that you need to work with. What is the theatre? Are you alluding to emotions of the entrepreneurship? Are you alluding to the politics, the governance? What are you alluding to? Is
I'm
all
talking
the
about the big show.
the whole thing?
These are I'm talking about the kind of. I won't talk about Lot 14. Well, I will in many ways. That there's theatre associated with that. Now, I don't mean that in a derogatory way.
Yeah.
I mean it in terms of, like, entrepreneurship plays out at a personal level, sure, but it also plays out at a social level. We've got a certain subset of the population need to be out there on the edge playing with the new ideas, because we've certainly got this subset down here who don't want anything to change, and they're probably not high in openness, etc. So a lot of the signaling that goes along with, we've got Google here, we've got Amazon here, that to me is theatre in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I call it signaling, to be kinder. It's so much of things is about perception in the entrepreneurship space. Now, I'm not against kind of influencing from the level of perception. I mean, reflexivity is everywhere. It's the way we perceive things affects the world around us, but it can go too far. It can go too far. And one thing I'm curious about in South Australia is I love the high-tech space and the space industry and all of that. But when you look at entrepreneurship, we tend to focus on the high-tech spaces. Even in medical, we focus on biomed.
Yeah.
There's so many other entrepreneurs going around, and there's so many other problems to solve, such as, hospital ramping. But we tend to focus on very abstract domains for our entrepreneurs at the moment. AI, cyber, space, very difficult for people to grapple with in a day-to-day life sense. It's all the way out here. I actually think a lot of what we need to grapple with is a lot closer to home. So I'll pause there.
No. So when you...
How am I going, Daniel?
No,
I feel like I'm swimming in multiple directions sometimes.
Well, this is the beauty of having these in-depth podcasts, right? We'll end up at one point somewhere. The idea of going after it and being willing to go after it, though, going back to your quote, having an idea, thinking and believing that it'll work, and then going after it. And you used the words leap of faith. I remember the day I walked out of my previous job to start this. And I actually remember, I'm an Indiana Jones fan. Are you an Indiana Jones fan by any chance?
I'm acquainted with Indiana Jones movies, but not...
Yeah, so there's a part, I think it's in the Temple of Doom or one of the Last Crusade. It's the Last Crusade, right? Where he takes the leap of faith. He takes a step onto the invisible bridge. And it's kind of how I felt. I had to believe that there was a bridge there. I had to believe that there was something that I could step on. I had to believe in myself. I had to believe in my ability that if something was to go wrong, I would have the skill set and nous to be able to handle it. So when you talk about having the willingness to head out and take that leap of faith, why do we see so many people have the willingness to take that step, but then stop at the first sign of issues or hurdles or problems? And what do you believe as a leader in this space that these entrepreneurs can do to overcome those hurdles?
First of all, I love that when you wanted to explain a turning point in your life, you went to a movie reference.
Yeah. When in Rome, right?
You see what
yeah, that's right.
You see what I mean? I remember watching the Fire Festival documentary. Do you know the Fire Festival?
I don't know.
It's this fellow who, I think it was with Ja Rule. They started a music festival on an island.
Yeah.
Everyone bought tickets, and it was a shambles.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic documentary. I know they do them now on like Theranos and
Yeah.
WeWork and whatnot. But I remember watching this, and it was kind of an exercise in dealing with trauma, looking at someone who was in too deep.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a fellow in it. He should have been as angry as anyone of what happened, but he said he was kind in his appraisal. He said, "Desperate people do desperate things." I am not against people stopping. I think that's often the best decision rather than just commit until it works.
Yeah.
Because we often don't see the wreckages that are left by entrepreneurs that can't let go. On the other hand, there is a certain... that you need to have that certain or sense of faith with confidence that you can actually adapt and overcome the challenges at hand. So I'm disagreeing with myself. I'm putting two things forward because I actually think it's something in the middle called the zone of proximal development.
Mm-hmm.
It's you need to have an understanding if you're reaching too far or too shallow. If you reach too shallow, you don't get anywhere. If you reach too far, it all falls apart. So what is that? There tends to be as there's a curve associated with this. What is the right point for you? And if I could, if to make it relevant, because you said people might be watching, I mean, that's something that I found with entrepreneurship. It was finding what was right for me, not trying to run anyone else's race. But if you're not good at public speaking, try public speaking. Or maybe that's too much. Maybe try speaking to your friends about it. Maybe aim smaller. And it's not about just reaching once. It's reaching over and over and over and over again, and slowly your terrain gets mapped a little more, or you develop the ability to reach a bit further each time. And it becomes a skill set that then starts to grow and you can nurture. And in any walk of life, it's like if you wished you went back and studied, well, it doesn't mean you've got to sign up to do a PhD. Maybe buy a book of the domain you're interested in and take a look at that. So that's kind of how I'd consider it, that zone of proximal development. Careful of reaching too far. If you reach too shallow, you're never going to make the change. So,
I listened to a podcast recently, very recently, and they were talking about entrepreneurship and all the above, and then they got into the word trauma, right? Which you used. You said entrepreneurship and starting a business is traumatic, and the study. So the podcast was with a guy by the name of Mo Gawdat, who was, I think he was the COO of Google, and now he has written a book on happiness and all the above. And he talks about trauma, and he talks about the experience of trauma. And he interviewed 12,000 people about their traumatic experiences and said, if you could, would you erase that traumatic experience from your life? But take into the consideration that if you erase that traumatic experience from your life, you lose everything that came after it. You lose the friendships, you lose the learnings, you lose the experiences, you lose everything that follows. 99.9% of the people said they wouldn't erase it, that they would still go through the trauma. And we're talking about extreme trauma, right, that some of these people went through. One thing that I've learned, and I would love for you to elaborate on it as well, is that, yes, entrepreneurship is traumatic, but every single time you have that gut-wrenching feeling, every single time you have that popping of the champagne, you're building, like, it almost feels like this piece of fabric that is, like you said, it's iterating, it's growing every single time. Why, when we're in these situations, do we give up? When 99% of us are saying, actually, I wouldn't change that.
I believe there's a limit. I'm very wary of romanticizing failure. I hear a lot of statements like, we just need to embrace failure more and things like that. I actually don't agree with that at all. I think it's too low resolution and it can be taken in the wrong way. I do get that, my life has been defined by certain dark times, and that's resulted in preparing me for other ones that came, but I have seen people that have been knocked out completely.
Yeah.
And I'm wary of glamorizing that too much. Now, part of why I have multiple companies is I can walk away from any of them at any time. And if you can't walk away, you're captured by it. And sometimes you can have the strength to be able to find a way out. Sometimes you can't. And if you can't walk away from it because it's all tied up in personality and also it's the personal, the professional, even families are tied up in a lot of these things. It's if you can't walk away from it, then you've got to be very careful of the consequences of your actions. Now, I get that this is often why I'm not really part of the entrepreneurial kind of narrative because archetypally it's like, no, you got to go after it. Everything's great, fabulous, cool. There is a limit. And I'm just wary of not having that in the conversation. And yeah, maybe I'll just pause there.
I do love the idea, though. I mean, you said what was the word you used? You're trapped by it almost if you can't walk away. I run a business that I love. I put a lot of time and effort into, countless amount of hours. Then you throw in a podcast on the top of it, and
Of course.
and
You do too much.
And add. So for me, I almost have two things going on at once. Really want this to succeed, really want it to grow, really want it to scale, really want to become a household brand and a name, especially within South Australia, let alone Australia, and grow that model. But I feel like, and maybe this is something I can learn from you when you say if you're not walking around, I feel like if I'm not putting in the time and effort, then I reduce the opportunity for this business to grow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
You obviously don't have that attitude given the scope of what you're doing.
I have had that opportunity, that attitude in the past, and there's a tremendous pressure on the individual in so many ways. So, and you're not alone. In fact, most entrepreneurs that I know that get up and give the big keynotes, you get 1.5 glasses of wine into them after the fact, and it's a very different story. But we tend to think about entrepreneurship just from that human, individual lens as well. So much of this is not in your control. What happens if there's a financial crisis tomorrow? Like a really big one.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how strong your vision is about we're going to be the best in the world and all, like obviously speaking.
You can get sideswiped. A
melodramatically,
pandemic
but
comes
it's like
in play.
A pandemic comes into play. It's those feelings I've found to be really interesting. I actually think that's the good stuff. Like, yes, we have our visions, but we're also aiming lower as well. We're playing chess one move at a time rather than trying to play 20 moves at a time. And we're acknowledging that even be it tech waves, be it economic waves, be it social waves, be it cultural waves, be it demographic waves, we're in the middle of some very complex systems. And there's a certain arrogance that comes with, I'm going to have a vision and impose that on the world. We're as much listening as we are trying to. Like, again, I talk in these things that might appear to be antithetical, but it's that tension that allows us to find our way we feel. Even from South Australia, there are inherent challenges here. It doesn't matter how confident I am. I'm not in Silicon Valley. So either I can pretend like I am and just off we go, or we can play our terrain and go, well, what is right for us at this stage? What's right for South Australia at this stage? What's right for Australia at this stage? And at this time, at this point in time as well. So, yeah, we try to balance out those sorts of ways of thinking to figure out what we do, because we're always faced with decisions day to day. And that's, to me, where the battle is won and lost.
How do you know what's right? How do you know what's right for this terrain? Like you say, I'm not in Silicon Valley, I'm here in Adelaide. I need to understand what's right for this terrain, what's right for this community, what's right for my potential customer here. How do you do that research? Like, where does that information come from? And every business is going to have its differences, right? But
of course.
What is the general makeup of that, understanding the terrain?
I'm still learning about the terrain. I loved Adrian Temple's podcast that we did with him the other day, because that is context we don't talk about.
Yeah.
That's part of the terrain. But for us, it's like, rather than trying to solve it, it's how do we navigate it? And again, that's why we don't overpromise. We don't try to change the world on every single project we do. It's as much what's our role to play, how can we bring value in the immediate term, and then over time, how does that build? Because we don't have an ecosystem that has a huge amount of capital and gentrification being poured in to allow for big successes and failures. We've learned over time about that propensity, that propensity for adaptation.
Yeah.
That proximal kind of zone. It's how much can we push things, and then when are we over pushing them? Because we have critical limitations across everything. The other way I'll approach it is one of my supervisors at uni. I was very nervous about going back. Mature age student, my brain's turned to mush, whatever.
Yeah. And you're studying now the Masters
They're finishing that at the moment.
of Philosophy.
It's an MPhil
MPhil.
in Mathematical and Computer Sciences.
Okay, great.
So, great. He said, Anton, there's two toolboxes.
Yep.
One, which is the set of tools that you can use safely.
Mm-hmm.
Call it machine learning. I don't know, I would call it specific tools within machine learning.
Yep.
I can use those safely. I've been trained on them. The other is the toolbox of domains you can navigate safely. And that's a question of experience. That's a question of, like, we've been around football, for instance, for 10 years now, and we've tried and failed at things, we've succeeded at others, great. That, to me, is as important as that. And so it's having this sense of patience if we are going to be changing things, of how quickly we can actually build that experience through the adventures we're having. So that's kind of how we look at it.
That's brilliant.
I don't know if it is. It just works for us, to be honest.
Well, and that, I think, is probably the main point that we need to take out of this, is that you actually need to figure out what works for you and for your situation and for your life and your family and whatever it might be.
It is very easy to figure out when you're wrong, though. You run out of money.
Yeah.
Or you oversell something.
Well, this
and
is
you lose
the
a
but
relationship.
this is the fear
it's
of
like, it's not just this internal kind of I'm self-developing. It's no. It's we're in games and we're forced to actually deal with these things.
Yeah.
And off we go.
Well, one thing that's not spoken about a lot, and I'll get vulnerable here if I have to, the fear of running out of money, the fear of cash flow is huge from an entrepreneurial point of view, or even just any business point of view, isn't it? And a leadership point of view of understanding, how do I keep these lights on?
Well, how do you deal with that fear?
Well, you just push harder. I think, you just find another way or figure it out. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know there's one answer to that.
But how do you feel? How do you deal with that fear?
Ask
I'm start
Paula over here, and I play into the theatre sometimes. Like I do. I get emotional. I get caught up in the fact that, everything we're working hard for could fall over at any one point. Someone could pull the rug out. The pandemic could come along. I understand there's a matter of mindset here and bringing it back and concentrating on what you can control. Do I have control over this situation? You do that diagram, but you that flurry goes out and then you bring it in, right?
So when people talk about entrepreneurs need to be fearless, what do you say to that? That your fear isn't warranted. You should just be fearless. That's what entrepreneurs should be, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what's often said, but I don't know that is something that can actually be practiced and delivered upon.
Oh, but this is part of the problem.
Yeah.
We have these things that are said, and I think it sets people up to fail.
It does.
Then they feel a sense of guilt that they're terrified. Yeah. So look, I mean.
So you're saying that I'm buying the wrong story?
Well, I'm saying that the lived experience is often very different than the narrative.
Yeah.
And we can lean into the narrative, but I find it hard when I see the narrative and then I talk to entrepreneurs who are actually not living that, and it's almost misrepresentative. They're forced to do the theatre, but then the fact is down here, so they're living two lives in many ways. I find that fascinating. I'm not criticizing it.
No.
It's a necessity in a lot of ways. But look, the way we think about it is fear is a useful thing. But it's useful to be afraid of the right things. I mean, are you more afraid of running out of money? Are you more afraid of not continuing on the journey you're on? And that's actually a calculus which is, I know it's a negative calculus, but it's a lot easier to define pain than it is joy.
Yeah.
So it's which one are you more afraid of? And then the next question we go to is, Well, just because you're afraid doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's like if it's meaningful enough, that's a question of courage. I mean, there is no courage without fear, right? If it's just easy, well, you just go ahead and do it, and off we go. And it's like, no, I've got more respect for someone that's terrified but finds it meaningful enough to actually go ahead and do it despite that. Not because they have to do it, but because they find it meaningful enough to overcome that. Sorry, I'm getting really intelligent now, but
I think what's really interesting is like as you were saying that, then what was going through my mind is about what is it that I'm actually fearful of? Am I fearful of running out of money? No, actually, it's probably not the story that I'm telling myself. Am I fearful of not continuing the journey? Not really, because I believe I've got the mindset and ability to pick up anything and carry on, right? And start something new, or I'll just knock on Anton's door and say, hey, can I come work with you? Whatever, right? Like I've got a network that can help me pick myself back up again.
Right.
As you were talking then,
now you understand why I have multiple things going.
Yeah. And as you were talking then, I was literally asking myself or thinking to myself, is the fear ego-based? Is the fear based on the simple fact that I do not want to fail or be seen as a failure? Even though the entrepreneurial world idolizes failure, you need a failure, you need this, you need that, I don't want to fail. I don't want to be seen to fail. I don't want to let people down in that process as well. The people that work with us, the people that we support, the customers that we work with.
Sure.
That's probably more what would sit in my gut more than anything else, letting people down.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
I deeply agree.
Yeah.
Well, look, one of the things I found most meaningful about entrepreneurship is if you want to know all of your hopeless inadequacy, start a business.
That's right.
Because you will project it everywhere.
Yeah.
And then you've got to deal with it.
Yeah.
Then you've got to deal with it. And that's part of why I talk like this, is because I'm not perfect by any stretch. I've got all sorts of things that I'm trying to grapple with. But it's why I've gone back to university. I have to sort that out. I mean, here's another one. I find it hard to be confident all the time, particularly in these domains that I'm very unconfident. I've got a lot of doubt about. So I go to university because that's a way of having a space I can grapple with doubt rather than projecting that onto a company that requires me to be confident. It just separates it. And that's worked for me. But it's, family can play this role, having, a partner that's going with you through those moments of crisis. There's all sorts of different strategies and tactics you can do, but it's you will project it on your business, and it's you either face it or you let it just become part of what the business is.
I mean, university, you're doing the field in data science and mathematics, which is obviously a learning, right? But to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems a tactical type of learning more than a behavioural type of learning.
What do you mean?
Well, in data science and mathematics, are you learning about self?
Absolutely.
You are?
Absolutely.
Okay. Can you elaborate?
I see the world through the models that I have of it.
Okay.
There is a running joke with my supervisors. Whenever I do a course, I'd end up consulting in it shortly after. No, but so there was one fabulous course on networks, on network analytics.
Yeah.
And understanding how to grapple with what social networks are, be them hierarchies in businesses or business networks. And whilst it was a theoretical language, suddenly I was looking at my world through those lenses.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was looking at all of the hierarchies around Adelaide and how there aren't many weak links between them. And so then I'm mapping the startup ecosystem with the 𝐤𝐵 using a social network analysis. And suddenly it's like, oh, okay, this is helping me understand something that I hadn't put my finger on. Look, there's an aha moment.
Well, it's given you a new perspective, yeah.
And I believe that that's part of I don't want to call it self-development, but it's like that's part of what I found really rewarding in this, that aha moment sometimes it's in literature, sometimes it's in mathematics, when you understand it and it's like, it was like a truth that was always waiting for you.
The light bulb goes off.
Yeah, but it was just waiting for you to catch up on that. And so that's what I find really rewarding in this. And call me a romantic about academia. That's honestly where I think a lot of the value is.
But are you learning? I think where my question come from, you talked about projecting emotions, projecting doubt onto businesses. Are you learning how to not project that doubt?
Absolutely.
Is that through the confidence that you're building and the perspectives that you're gaining through your education?
Again, sometimes, but also sometimes doubt's a healthy thing. Here's an example. I go onto a footy club. I say, I've got a VR headset. You know, your players are fast, your players are fit, your players are skillful. It's the above-the-shoulders training. They've got limited time on the park. We can simulate that in VR. They go, great, fantastic. That's a good startup sell. Problem is, none of the players have ever learned how to play football using a headset. None of the coaches have ever done that either. You've got some that love it, some that hate it. We don't know anything about the technology. From a language perspective, we also don't know how it fits in a week-to-week coaching perspective. What's relevant? Maybe the coaches are struggling with clarity of narrative messaging. Maybe there are some technical issues. The list goes on. We found a million different ways it could go wrong. So now when we go to clubs, we wear that doubt on our sleeve because it's a healthy sort of doubt. It's like, I'm not going to claim that this is going to solve every problem, but I'm confident that we're enough experienced to be able to navigate it for what you're trying to do. Or if they're trying to do too much, we'll just say, look, guys, maybe we'll recommend something else. So I'm wary of saying doubt is a bad thing. I think doubt can be a healthy thing and it can be an unhealthy thing, and it's all situational dependent. Sorry, I'm getting all razzed up now.
I love it. I think when you are going into those football clubs, though, and there's that element of doubt, there is also an element of certainty of what benefit they're going to get from this, isn't there?
Nah.
There isn't.
Oh, no.
So what are you selling? And how do you...
That's why we don't sell to clubs. In fact, the last few tons, we've actually done it for free.
Okay, so it's now about gathering of information and data.
Yeah. But look, it's not just about, I'm going to do X service to bring value. You might want to do X dollars worth of service to have a 50% chance of bringing some value. Okay.
There's other ways to do business.
Well, there's a probabilistic component of this, and that's what startups are. A lot of the time, money is going into these startups to diversify against everything else. It's like a Netflix might come along and knock out our blockbuster investments. So we've got to bet on the curveballs out here. So, and that's why, I don't know, it's tough to talk about because VR is still considered to be in the box of high tech and really open. We've got to really try everything there, but we now know more than enough about it to know what the problems are. And that's where my frustration kicks in. It's when we're still talking about those conversations and clients are signing up to that when it's like, but we've already tried that. What's next? So
where does the innovation keep coming from? And you're obviously working in so many areas. Does innovation come from the point of just being able to think about something, or the other perspectives that you're learning from all these other companies that you're able to bring in? So say with Convergen Artisan Group, Double Bishop, whatever, all those businesses that you do run, and then you go, okay, something I learned here I could bring to Convergen. Is that where the innovation comes from?
Like we're exposed to some pretty incredible walks of life, and I'm very lucky to have had that. We meet different people, we have different influences, we see different challenges, and that gives us an exposure to a lot of unknowns to navigate. Where does it come from? We've stopped looking for solutions. We've started looking for better problems.
Okay.
This is another. I'm flipping the table again on something. It's a lot of the orthodox thinking amongst some entrepreneurship is we've just got to solve this problem with a new solution. The argument I've got is, well, why doesn't that solution already exist? Why has no one thought of that? Are we suddenly smarter than everyone that's come before us? Or is there a better problem we can solve? And Moneyball's a really funny example of this. Moneyball.
I love it. Yeah.
People think it's about they introduced data science into baseball. No, that's not what they did. He actually asked a deeper question, which is there's a scene where he asks, "What's the problem?" And they say, "Well, we're trying to replace this player who has these incredible stats." And he goes, "No, what's the problem?" And they came up with another thing. He said, "No, the problem is that there's rich teams, there's poor teams, there's 50 layers of crap, and then there's us." And he aimed at solving that rather than trying to play the game that everyone else was playing. So he went, what's a deeper problem that we can start to look at And then what are the obvious solutions there? And that to me is how we can compete rather than chasing after Sydney firms or Melbourne firms or our competitors internationally. It's like how, with the time and space that we have in Adelaide, can we look at problems that no one's even ready to grapple with yet? That to me is what's exciting. That's where a lot of the innovation comes from.
Finding better problems. How do you? I know you do a bit of work in mental models and that space. I know you love that world. How do you position yourself to ask those questions about finding the bigger problems? Like it seems like a rabbit hole that could be hard to find.
It's pretty easy.
It is?
It's really easy.
Explain.
Daniel, what are you frustrated with at the moment?
Oh, I don't reckon we've got enough time on this. No.
Give me
my health.
your health.
Yeah.
Maybe your model's wrong.
Yeah. In what way?
So, funny thing to say about your health. No, it's like there's this idea that if you're frustrated by something, then your model's off.
Mm.
And rather than...
As in the model that you're working to? Or
yeah,
working
because
with?
you're expecting something to happen and something different happens.
Yeah.
Or you want something to
Well,
happen.
that's the
So it goes, okay.
definition of frustration, isn't it?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
So what's going on there? And I found that's really useful in listening to how I'm reacting to things. And I'm temperamentally not great sometimes, particularly when I've got a million things I'm trying to deal with. And suddenly a model starts breaking down. I'm like, well, maybe I'm thinking about that wrong. Maybe I need to flip that on its head. And that's tended to be what's been most useful for me. Going, okay, what's frustrating? Let's flip it. Let's play with it, and why is it happening? And then let's explore, okay, maybe I need to rethink that, rethink my expectations. Like, for instance, the entrepreneurial side of things. I used to get really frustrated at the theatre. And I was like, well, okay, maybe it's just a two-dimensional thing. We've got what's actually happening and then the theatre, and we need to exist in a two-dimensional domain. Okay, it's not frustrating anymore. It's now sophisticated enough to deal with that as it is. But the problem is then it compounds and I start sounding like this with all this combinatorial complexity. No, but like that's where I found is a really healthy place to look. As I'm on these adventures, what's frustrating? And then, okay, well, what's that revealing? Let's start thinking about things differently.
Yeah,
Start to look into that more.
So, for example, can we put this into practical terms? If I'm saying I'm frustrated by my health, right?
That's a hard one.
Let's go weight.
Let's not do that. Oh, wait.
Weight is the other one. So
why are you frustrated by it?
Well, I'm got a few extra kilos, don't have enough time to put into my own personal
Why
training.
don't you have enough time?
Well, this is the thing. I ask these questions every single day, and I think it's actually recently that I have discovered that unless this vessel is working, this business hasn't got anything to do you know what I mean? Like
right, so I poked at you a little bit.
Yeah.
And what's it revealed?
Well, it's revealed exactly where I've landed, I think, which is, using the aeroplane analogy, put the mask on your face first before anyone else.
Well, look, I'll poke at you a little bit more. Is it because you're self-conscious about it or because you're worried about what happens if you go down because of the pressure that's on you? Are you I don't want to get too into it on a podcast, but like...
No, I am happy to talk about it. Because I think I'm not the only one going through this, so if I can share my experience and I want other people to learn from it as well. I think it's because I'm not in peak condition to perform in the role that I play. Right. It's like you think about football, you want your midfielders to be in peak condition. You want them to be able to run all day. You want them to be eating right. You want them to have their fitness at a certain level. You want their skin folds at a certain level. You want their mindset to be in a certain way. They're high performing. They're elite athletes. They're the best in the world. AFL footballers are the best in the world at what they do. Mm-hmm. And it's because of the training, the effort, and the sacrifice that they make.
Right.
So I put a lot of time, effort, and sacrifice into the business, but I don't actually really concentrate on what is the most important part of that, which is managing myself.
Why
managing
not?
It's a time and priorities thing.
Right.
I think at the moment I have got my priorities confused.
Okay.
And I think it's just a matter of spinning that. And I think, this is something that I've come to conclusion. Do you agree?
So
or
how are you going to spin that?
Well, I mean, now that everyone's heard this on the podcast, I dare say there's going to be a few people holding me account, but I think it is an area where I need to start reviewing my models and reviewing my...
There we are.
Yeah, reviewing my
And part of the first step
habits.
I found with a lot of these things is speaking it into existence,
Mm.
being able to talk about it, being able to be vulnerable about it. But even just poking you a little bit, it's like we all know that we've got our things we need to deal with.
Yeah.
But at what stage do you deal with them is the question, particularly when everyone's drowning, and particularly as an entrepreneur where you're drowning on a daily basis.
Yeah,
on things.
correct.
Like if the priorities are wrong, it's easy to say, "Oh, just change your priorities." It's like, no. How are you going to build enough of a foundation to make that pivot easy?
Yeah.
Better than easy, something that actually becomes a strength. And that's what I've tried to do. Is I've gone, okay, well, rather than treating it as a burden, it becomes something that's a feature. And then that becomes something I can grapple with, but I need to externalize it. I need to find other institutions or communities that'll hold me accountable to it, because the pressure you're under, you just get sucked back in.
Yeah.
You know, you might try for a few weeks, but
Yeah. Habits kick back in.
Absolutely.
And it's easier, path of
it's
least
not
resistance.
just developing new habits, it's developing new structures. And that's what I've found has helped me with that.
Do you go on a course correction? Like, do you look at your life from a point of view of every 3 months I'm going to review my mental models? Or do you just take it as, that's starting to feel pain, or I'm starting to feel the frustrations there that now I'm going to review? Are you proactively reviewing
Even
your
that
models?
model of those 5 domains, I started doing that every Christmas about 5 years ago.
Yeah,
That was
okay.
very healthy. Personal life had gone out the window. All sorts of things were a mess.
Yeah.
And I started a new way of kind of thinking about that. It used to be more rigid. Now I'm a bit more fluid with it, just because life is changing so quickly. It's like, you've got to be... It's kind of become a habit now in certain ways. So I think about it, whether I'm writing stuff down or setting goals and things like that. That tends to be every 3 months, but specifically at the end of the year when there's a hard punctuation mark and I can go, okay, well, what just happened?
Yeah.
What am I aiming at next?
Well, what model do you work on from a well-being point of view, and from your own, like if you're talking about not projecting doubt or projecting the wrong message or behaviors to these businesses and boards. I mean, you're right here. We're sitting with this, beautiful program of the Adelaide Film Festival, which you chair. How do you bring your best self as the chair to that company and business and organisation and community every single day?
Yep.
Is there something that you do personally? Is there something that do you practice spiritually? What is it that you do?
It's not. We went down several rabbit holes. This is not a rabbit hole I thought we'd go down. Travel's always helped me, just to get a sense of space and time away, just change the environment. I found that's really useful. Reading helps a lot. I don't do enough. No one ever does enough, right?
Yeah.
But I often find that's helpful. And with regards to AF, I'll be very frank. When I was first appointed the chair, I was very nervous about that. I was terrified. I've got 𝐢𝐭'𝐥𝐿 on the board. I've got these incredible filmmakers on the board.
It's amazing.
Josh Fanning, amazing. Like, who am I to chair that? And so I channeled that fear to say, well, I've got to do the work. I've actually got to put in the work here. If I'm going to take the responsibility of leading this, and I'm sufficiently terrified, I've got to put in the work to make sure that I'm ready to do this, and make sure that if I'm doing things, I'm doing it with a level of authority that I can live with. So we started a philanthropy program. So I had to become a donor. I'm not asking people for money if I'm not willing to become a donor myself. And, whether it be 𝐰𝐸𝐫𝐤 or whether it be finding mentors, I've gone, okay, well, what do I need to do to make sure that I don't look back and regret this? I feel a sense of pressure, not just on a selfish perspective. So I don't want to let everyone down as well. So what do I need to do if I'm going to take that responsibility? And that helps kind of pull me through. So,
is there a limit to the amount of responsibility that you can take on?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Have you found that limit?
At times, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does it look like and feel like when you're at that limit?
Nah.
Too big a question.
We won't go into that. That's, everyone's got their limit. Everyone's got their limit. And it's a function of a lot of things. So no, maybe that's a bit too vulnerable for this.
Okay. Not a worry. We'll ask that on podcast number 2. Let's talk about the Adelaide Film Festival and everything that you're doing in that world.
Sure.
It's an exciting space.
Right.
It's. I want to ask you though. Do you get a lot of support in this space? It seems as if government, especially recently, the new government that's in place, and we're talking specifically from a South Australian point of view here, for this comment alone, that their focus has moved away from potentially arts, but more into health and stuff like that. Is that something that will disrupt the industry? Are you optimistic about the film industry in Australia or here in South Australia? Where does it sit? For someone, and I'm speaking from someone who doesn't know that much, so from a layman's point of view.
Right. Okay. This is where I could get into real trouble. No, I'm very passionate about film.
Mm-hmm.
Very passionate about storytelling. I also think South Australians need to have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
I also think South Australia needs to grapple with the issues of its day. This is the role of contemporary cinema or contemporary storytelling. This ranges from stolen generation stories. There's a fabulous one called The Last Order premiering here in the program. I could wax philosophical about that for hours. But whether it's that, whether it's migrant stories, whether it's our identity, we're at the intersections of so many things. Where are we actually playing these cultural issues out? So I really believe in this intersection. I do it because it's meaningful. And this is not my company. I'm not.
No.
It's the government's. Yeah. They own it. And I'm a volunteer, to be very frank. So
Yeah. Okay.
ROI for my time. It's good for the government. So, look, I'm very wary about talking about government priorities. They are faced with challenges that I can't claim to understand. We were very lucky in that the current government had an election commitment to annualise the Adelaide Film Festival.
Okay.
Now, I'll talk about that for a moment. Adelaide Film Festival has been a biennial event, just like the Adelaide Festival used to be, just like the Fringe used to be. And typically when festivals become annual, they take off because suddenly they're not scaling up and then shutting down, scaling up and shutting down,
There's
and
repetition.
losing audiences and losing people and all that. And AF has received some money from the state government to help with annualisation. It has not been the only factor. We've gone out and raised the money. Iris Swain has been absolutely fantastic in building a sponsorship program and helping us get our house in order in that regard. We've set up philanthropy to help bridge this gap. Ticket sales, amazing. We've gone, let's go back to fundamentals and let's really fight to make this relevant to South Australians. So we're activating not just the CBD, but the Odeon and Semaphore, we've got the Capri, Kate Blanchett's Australian premiere of Tara is going to be there, but we're really focusing on going back to basics with that. Now, I'm not critical of past leaders. They've been dealt challenging hands and done the best with what they could, but Matt Kesting and the whole team and the board have really focused on getting our house in order so that we can grow well. And it's been an entrepreneurial endeavour. I'm really proud of it. So the program is, I think it's 7 South Australian first-time filmmakers.
Brilliant.
So we actually have a generation of filmmakers in South Australia. I mean, Matty Parry on opening night, the Raka Raka Boys on closing night, Matt Vesely with Monolith, Sean Laheath with Carnifex. This is a cultural moment for the film industry. Now, to pivot away from that, there is tension within the film industry. It's complicated. On one hand, we love being a services economy in Australia, which is Hollywood comes here, it's great, creates jobs, they go home. On the other hand, we've got our own IP. How do those worlds coexist together? And what's been fascinating in South Australia is this concept of creative industries. So creative industries is not just about arts plus commercialisation. It's all about IP generation and IP commercialisation. It is, for the first time that I've seen, actually focused on seeing our storytellers as cultural commodities, that we actually need them there creating that IP rather than using all of our resources creating and commercialising other people's IP. So I'm really excited about where things are at the moment. Look, government support I will be grateful for in all shapes and forms. However, there's also more private investment happening nowadays. There's a lot of other factors, and we're just getting more competitive. It's like I'm trying to be optimistic about the situation. So I'll stop there. I'm getting all razzed up.
What is the AFF? What does it look like in context from an Australian point of view? Where does South Australia sit as are we a leader in this space?
Absolutely.
We are?
Absolutely. People don't realise the reputation AF has at Cannes Film Festival and Sundance. It's
the work
of Amanda Duthie and Katrina Sedgwick before that, and Matt Kesting now has been. It's a soft diplomacy exercise as much as anything. It gives local filmmakers a platform on the world stage. South Australians don't know.
No.
A lot of people don't even know the app exists.
No, well, I knew it existed. I don't know much about it. I think this is what's really interesting is that, when we talk about the industries, and we had, like we said, had Adrian Temple, we're talking about all these different industries and everyone's focusing on tech and Lot 14 and all the above.
Yep.
What can we do to put more emphasis and onus on this industry? Is it something that could really take off here? And this is a really naive question, but could Adelaide become like another Hollywood type scenario? Is that a possibility?
I don't want it to be a Hollywood type scenario. I think we could. I don't want to be like South by Southwest. I want to be like what we are here.
Yeah, okay.
And to me, that doesn't start with some people will say we've got to get the brand association. That gives us the credibility to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I believe it's time to try something a little different. We've tried that. Good. I'm a big fan of supporting the local entrepreneurs. And in the film space, those are the film producers, those are the film directors, those are the writers. It's hard because you've got to get a critical mass for an industry, and I get that, but we have a critical mass. And to me, it's like, what could we be if we fulfilled our potential? And that means not just being a services economy, which has been crushed by automation. It's how do we focus on our product? Going back to product, and the product is really who are the filmmakers grappling with the stories of the day. And we focus on them. I think we could be something very special. And AF already is. It's already been happening in South Australia. We've got a tremendous culture and history of this. Rolf de Heer's got a project in this one as well. So it's like there is a we're negotiating from a position of strong foundations, but it's also what is AF going to be in an era of Netflix. We're fighting against programming algorithms that are beamed into the homes of every South Australian, bar a few. And we need things that are not just driven by entertainment and American sensibilities. We need this.
Well, that was going to be my next question. If you think you take in social media algorithms, right? Like you're on Instagram, you like this person playing guitar, they're playing a Metallica song. All of a sudden, you're going to see a whole bunch of Metallica music and people playing guitars come up on your feed, right? That's just the way the algorithm works. The algorithm of Netflix puts these big blockbuster films in front of us, and does money is the AFF of these films and these, like, you think about the amazing stories and the ability of these people to tell stories through film that may never see the light of day in some people's eyes because they've just got this algorithm that
of course
corporate world is putting in front of them.
And they're not seeing it as part of a community as well. Like, why are you doing this podcast?
To help spread good, positive stories and learnings.
But why is it just South Australian?
Well, it's got a bit of Australian in it. I have interviewed some overseas people as well, but it has a South Australian focus because I don't believe there is. I'm passionate about this state, and I am passionate about, when I ask questions about could AFF become the next Hollywood, I'm always looking for what could set South Australia apart.
I ask because you are speaking largely to South Australian audiences.
Correct.
And with the tech revolution, things got global very quickly. And we've lost senses of community. There's been a whole bunch of challenges that have come with that. But some conversations should be at the level of state and city. And we have big challenges to navigate, both in our history and in our future. And Netflix isn't going to do that for us. It's how are we able to engage with this? And look, there's a fascinating thing we do with the program. There's always going to be controversy with film festivals. We actually need some controversy. Otherwise, we're not grappling with any difficult terrain. And it's something that, considering that storytelling in a community is such a part of who we are and biologically wired up to experience, to come together to experience one of these movies, if we can impact one person, that becomes a ripple effect. Just like the Indiana Jones moment that you described earlier. If you come to AF and see Triangle of Sadness or a film that you wouldn't have otherwise seen, and you have that moment, suddenly there's a ripple effect in South Australia. And that, over time, the exponential function kicks in. It's not about bed stays necessarily. That's important too, but it's about culture. And every company, every industry, they talk about how culture is important. This isn't just about film. This is about the subject matters that we're navigating, which is relevant to so many walks of life. So that is why I get so passionate about this. Maybe I'll simmer down a bit.
No, I do like it. I think my daughter came home, and I'm for the life of me trying to remember it. She came home probably last week or so, and she said to me, "Dad, they have this thing called Spectacular, where at the end of every year, the whole school performs like an act in front of the community, all the parents and whatnot. Sure. It's a big thing that they have at the entertainment centre, which is really exciting. And this year, my daughter comes home and she says, "Dad, we're dancing to this song, and it's a song written by a Torres Strait Islander and an Aboriginal man, and the dance that they're doing is, a traditional Indigenous dance, which is, to pay tributes and all the above." And I apologize, I can't remember the name of the song, but I remember listening to the song and thinking to myself, this is actually amazing. Like, it's actually a song that I want to hear. So I added it to my playlist, and it got me thinking, what is all this stuff that I could be missing out on because it's just not part of the algorithms. So I think what I'm asking in this question is, how do we get more involved in this space? How do we see more of it? Is it just by, not everyone's going to listen to this podcast, right? But how do we spread the message of the great work that's happening here in South Australia? And how do we get it out there more, for those who are listening and those who want to connect in?
Well, I can share what we have been doing.
Mm-hmm. I'm asking more from the point of, what can we do? What can I do as someone who...
I need a champion for the Adelaide Film Festival.
You need someone.
You've got a platform. I need someone to champion this. And to be honest, we have champions.
Yeah.
But it's fun championing. This is something I learned with the 40 under 40 stuff. It's great fun to advocate for something just because it's meaningful, not because you get something out of it.
Yeah, correct.
And we're starting to see more of that. I have a tremendous empathy for a lot of arts organisations, particularly in this state.
Yeah.
They're doing so much with so little, and it's a lifestyle for so many of these people, just getting up every day and pouring their heart and souls into it with no time off in lieu and wages that would make you, oh my God. But it's like, to me, it's less about just going to the government for money. That's part of the conversation. We need the state to own its film festival and feel a sense of affection for it. And what I'm trying to do is go, I'm willing to stand up on this. Over to you.
Yeah. Let's do something about it.
Will you as well? I'm trying to take initiative in that regard. And it's not just talking about it. We've been putting in the work, building the organisation, building the team, building Matt, the CEO and creative director, to help him fulfill his potential. So I take tremendous joy in that. Tremendous joy. So,
well,
too much?
No, I'm going to call out because there's only so much I can do as well. But if anyone listening to
come
this,
along.
Come exactly.
Along. I'll circle some. Come along. I'd love to see what you think. See the community happen.
Brilliant.
So
I'll be there.
2 weeks, October 19th to 30th.
Excellent. I know Paula is in love with this space. I told her you went. Yeah. She's like, oh my God. Literally, that's how she said it.
Look, here's a proposition. Have some of the filmmakers on your podcast.
Yeah.
Have some of the new voices that are stepping through in the creative industries.
Happy to.
They're more interesting than I am.
Happy to share their stories. We'll get talking off air about that and what we might be able to do.
I'm giving you tasks. There you go. You asked.
Done. Perfect. But it's those who are listening in too, right? Because we do have a large corporate following. And these corporate leaders have influence. So, anyone want to get in contact with Anton and figure out how we can make this grow. I am very conscious of your time. We've embarked on a journey, our own journey within this podcast. I want to wrap up quickly. Just before I get it, we have a tradition where we ask some quick fire questions. For a bit of fun at the end of the show, just to leave a little bit of a smile. But before I do that, I want to ask one last question: is what does the future look like for Anton? Where are you? Where have you got your sights set? And is there a limit? Is there something that you're really passionate about that you have thought about that maybe you want to traverse into that world as well?
Adelaide Film Festival.
That's your.
I'm focused on that for the moment.
Yeah,
it was 2 years away, 2 years ago. And now it's here. So I'm quite focused on this as an inflection point. And that's something that...
Brilliant.
I won't add other things to the mix right now.
Is this an area that you feel you could create something great in? Like as in, you've got these businesses who are doing this amazing work, Adelaide Film Festival, who you're chairing. Is this something that you feel like there is some innovation to have in this industry that I could really champion?
I think I already have.
Yeah.
I think I've yeah.
Excellent. All right, we'll leave that there.
Yeah. Maybe cut that out.
Some quick fire questions to round off the show. What are you reading right now?
The Rise and Fall of the Neoliberal Order.
Ooh.
Mm.
Talk to me about that real quick.
I thought this was quick fire.
I know, but we can elaborate.
It is a book that talks about the rise of nationalism, the history of the neoliberal order from the 90s to today after the fall of the Soviet Empire, some of these macro trends around why are we seeing all these new political moments spring up and what the hell is going on. So, yeah.
Very relevant to what's currently happening. What is, I know you don't like the term self-development, but what is a book that you feel that stands out from the crowd when looking to embark on self-improvement?
Thinking Fast and Slow.
Daniel Kahneman.
I enjoyed that.
It's a ripper. Yeah. Is there any other podcasts that you listen to? Other than this one, of course.
I've listened to a lot of your podcasts.
I know, I said other than this one, of course.
Depends. It's as much about the guests as it is about the podcast. I have an affection for the Lex Fridman podcast.
Oh, Lex Fridman is by far one of my favourites.
Wild.
Yeah. Have you... so Lex is brilliant because he has a mind that just... You could just listen to him half the time, let alone the people that he gets on. Have you listened to another one that I love called The Diary of a CEO by Stephen Barrett? I think you'll really like that one too. They go into some pretty amazing topics as well.
There's another great local podcast, The Song Is Yours, a guy called Simon Fink.
Okay.
Comes from a real place of passion. He's a good man.
Yeah. What do they talk about on their show?
He interviews musicians.
Brilliant.
But he's not trying to make a big podcast. He's always, I've known him for a very long time.
Yeah.
He's always been so passionate about music. It's always impacted him at this level.
Yeah.
So when he interviews, it very much comes through. So,
yeah. Brilliant. Excellent. There's so much
Adelaide
happening
shout
here.
out.
Yeah. Perfect. What's one lesson that's taking you the longest to learn?
You choose your regrets.
Ooh.
That's Christopher Hitchens' thing he said. Kind of hit me. I was like, right. You choose the regrets you can live with. So
at the point in time of making the decision on what you're going to do is when you're choosing a potential regret as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that's deep. We could go down that rabbit hole. But we won't. 3 people, if you could have...
Asked,
I know, I love it.
What do you want me to do?
Do you know, sometimes I think about opening with these questions because I'm like, this could just set up.
Sure.
But I like finishing up. Anyway, that's a
finish strong. Here we go.
If you could have 3 people for dinner, who would they be?
Oh,
I'm assuming your partner's there.
Living or dead?
3 people, human beings that have ever existed.
Christopher Hitchens.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen Fry.
Oh, yes.
Who do you pair with those 2?
Be interesting.
Naomi Wolf.
Oh, yes.
I remember seeing an interview, I think it was Charlie Rose with Hitchens and Naomi Wolf, and just the repartee was divine. So
yeah.
Just for that banter.
Yeah, brilliant.
I don't know. I feel like I could come up with better answers than that, but yeah, that'll do.
But it's one dinner. You could have multiple. Invite other people to the other dinners. What is some of the best advice that you've ever received?
Oh, I don't know. Probably that, that I've received. Probably the toolbox thing I said earlier. Mm-hmm. It's not just about having good tools to wield. It's also about having an understanding of the domain to navigate it safely.
Yeah, I really like that point.
Particularly with the startup world where there are all these solutions looking for problems. It's like, whoa. There's a humility in listening to what's going on the ground too. So, yeah.
If you had access to a time machine, where would you go?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Someone who's so observant, you wouldn't... I always pictured you as someone who would go back.
To when?
I don't know.
You go back to all sorts of places. Like,
what? So there's no point in time that's in history?
I'd love to see Rachmaninoff play.
Yeah.
One of his piano concertos. I would have loved that.
Yeah, because you're a
I don't know. Like, am I
you're a
meant to go
pianist
back in
as well.
time and like kill Hitler? Isn't that the main thing you're meant to do?
Oh, yeah.
Like if that's on the table,
but we
then
learned,
that,
but we learnt lots from that. I think this goes
I'm
back
not going to morally justify any of that, so I'm just going to go to the next question.
Yeah.
So,
No, I don't endorse what happened, but I always come back to that point of what can be learned.
Of course.
If you could, if your house was on fire and where your family, your pets, everyone was safe,
Yeah.
and you had to go back inside for one thing, what would that one thing be?
Slide rule from my grandpa.
Hey,
A
what?
slide rule that my grandpa gave me.
Is
You
he
like that?
is he still
Yeah,
alive?
yeah,
He's still with us? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the sentimental value behind
He
that?
just gave it to me and I love him. So
Okay,
yeah.
that is good. You don't often, it's not something that you would have normally, is it? Really?
Well, you know, that would be weird.
Yeah. Well,
Have you not figured that out yet?
Well, I got asked this question the other day. It's not on this list, but I got asked it yesterday. What's something that you don't know enough about?
Oh, maths.
Yeah, okay.
The more I dig, the less I know. It's
And you know a lot. That's not all compared to me.
well, I feel a sense of revulsion even talking about it because compared to those that have actually stayed on the path, it's like, my God, I'll never catch up. It's
There's something about math, though, isn't it? Like it's just this universal language. No matter where you go in the world, everyone speaks the same language. In the universe,
there's a
everyone
sense of truth beneath it.
Yeah.
I mean, the question is, does it exist or is it? What's the quote? God made the integers, all the rest is the work of man. It's, There's a certain purity in it, but it doesn't mean that the world's not messy.
If you had one superhero power, what would it be?
I don't know. Better podcast performances.
Come on, there's got to be. You're in movies. You should have a superhero power.
I haven't thought about that question. I'm
No.
sorry.
The power of knowledge.
Right.
Surely that's got to be up there. Everyone goes with flying. Everyone goes with.
Be careful about that. You know,
Too
ignorance
much.
is bliss, right?
Yeah, good point. But then if you have the knowledge to get over whatever situation.
Yeah. I don't know.
Now, I flicked you a text last night saying that I want you to make sure you have a good shit joke that you can provide us. Did you bring one or not?
Look, I didn't. I mean, I was asked my girlfriend, and she said I've got a terrible sense of direction. So I packed up my stuff and just write.
Well done. I love it. You played that very, very well. Thank you so much for your time
Pleasure.
today, Anton. Thank you. We went.
I'll interview you next.
I don't
Give
know.
the people what they
There
want.
won't be that much depth, I don't think.
Oh, come on.
Thank you for all you are doing, right? I think, I sincerely mean that you are having an impact in more ways than one, not only on the entrepreneur world and the Adelaide Film Festival, but you are. I know the work that you're doing is contributing positively to both South Australia, and the world. So, thank you for all that you're doing, and I'm really keen to continue watching this path and watching your journey and watching all the changes and positive changes that you're going to make.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Excellent. That wraps up the show. Thank you, everyone. Where can we catch you and connect with you if we need to or want to?
Don't message me on LinkedIn. Don't message me on a social media service. Come to the Adelaide Film Festival from 19th of October to the 30th of October.
There you go.
I'll be at everything. So.
And that's where you'll find him. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Catch you next time. Thanks for listening to the podcast all. You can check out the show notes if there was anything of interest to you and find out more about us at SynergyIQ.com.au. I am going to ask, though, if you did like the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate, and review. And if you didn't like it, that's all right too. There's no need to do anything. Take care, guys. All the best.